All right. Hello. Welcome to another session of 10 at 10 with Spencer and I. I'm Madison. I'm a digital strategist here at Q Media Solutions.
And I'm Spencer Koppel. I'm a digital specialist here at Q Media Solutions.
And we usually, if you've tuned into a few 10 and 10s before, you know that we usually cover all things social media. We tend to do a lot of news, but this time we really kind of realized a lot of people were coming on to the Q Media Solutions blogs or pages. We were starting to notice a lot of questions and queries coming revolved around metrics and measuring performance. So what we're going to do today is stick to sort of social media, but we're going to cover a few topics on ideas on how you can, one, measure the best version of success on your social platforms, but then of course, how can you measure the success of different ad campaigns across different platforms that are all kind of giving you different things. How can you kind of get the best measure for success out of each of those platforms? So we
Yeah.
will get into that, but Spencer's got a fun little update for us
I
first.
don't know if it's fun, but
Yeah,
so
we'll
last
see.
week, so this is a quick little update about Google. Last week, I believe it was around Thursday, they announced that there was a huge change coming to their Google search platform. They said it's the biggest change within 25 years of Google search. Basically, what it's going to be doing is kind of switching up a little bit of search as we know it. So if you're searching something on Google, usually you have like the sponsored links and then blue links is what they're calling it. So when you search something up, you then click on a website. What this new change will potentially be, and they started rolling it out yesterday, and then they'll be rolling out more updates throughout the summer. What this new change will do is instead of just having links, you will now get an AI generated summary, basically, where you can then ask follow up questions. Think of it almost like a Chat GPT style interface where instead of just searching a topic or an item or whatever and then clicking a link, you will now search a topic. It'll give you an AI prompt of it. So it should kind of it'll be an interesting gap, and we'll kind of see what happens within that space and keep an eye out and let you guys know. But this potentially could be a really cool spot for Google. And like I said, it was just announced last week, and it just started rolling out yesterday. So it is still super early to have any kind of insights on what's happening fully with that. Just want to keep you guys in the loop on what we're hearing.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be so interesting to see the rollout of that. I know,
Mhm.
people have been kind of somewhat resistant, somewhat open to the AI summaries already. So it'll be interesting to see how people feel about that kind of being the full interface
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, so jumping back into sort of our topic for today, social media, measuring social media platform success. A few tips I'm going to walk through. The third thing I'm going to get to, the kind of the big chunk, is we'll look at specific metrics that you should be looking at for each platform. But a few kind of words of advice, sort of before we get there, is one that you want to stop comparing platforms all by the same metric. A successful TikTok campaign is not going to be the same or identical to what a successful LinkedIn campaign is. So instead of forcing universal benchmarks, marketers should really measure each platform against its intended role in the customer journey. Sort of an example of how that looks like here at Q Media Solutions, we know that Meta is really good for hard conversion, sales focused objectives. And that is because they have easier pixel implementation. It's a little easier to do event tracking, whereas TikTok is a little more difficult to set some of those things up. So it's a little bit better for some awareness level, sort of top of funnel goals. So you don't want to really be looking at just impressions across both of those platforms as a measure of success, because you're going to be you're not going to really be getting the same story or same good measure of what's working on those different platforms.
Mhm.
Another is that KPIs should align to business objectives and not vanity metrics. That's one we talk about all the time. But reach and impressions, or just how many people are seeing your ads or how many times, can be useful, but they don't necessarily indicate influence or impact of your ads. So the best marketers really tie KPIs to outcomes like engagement quality, lead generation, conversion efficiency, or brand lift. An example of that can be to be informed about the best potential goals on a platform and then how they relate to your business objectives. So I think we can just jump right into that, and how we kind of think over of platform purpose versus platform performance. Spencer, do you have anything to add on those ones?
No, for your next point, I might have something, but
Okay, I know we discussed this a few before, and we're like, oh, and this works for this. So we'll kind of this will be a
yeah,
little
I'll wrap
conversation.
up
So
my points when you're done with yours. So I'll go from there.
sounds good, but feel free. We forgot to say this at the top. If you want to throw any questions or anything throughout, whether specifically about your ads or just our topic in general. But so when you're looking at TikTok, that is a really good platform for more discovery and attention. It's really, like I said, top of funnel, awareness driven. So some metrics for that you want to use for success would be video views, completion rate, CPM, reach. Instagram is really is driven by community and brand affinity, and so there you want to look for engagement rate, saves or shares, your follow growth rates, maybe how many comments or story replies you're getting. Really a measure of that community focus and how effective you are in it. LinkedIn is really good for authority and lead generation. So you want to look at lead form completions, cost per lead, how many documents are being downloaded if you're sharing a document in your campaign or organically, and then your target market engagement, sort of what impression share or do you have within your target market on LinkedIn specifically. YouTube is really good for education and consideration. So that there we look at view through rates, average watch time for ads or videos, video completion rate, site visits, and then assisted conversions. Since YouTube specifically is a little bit lower or a little higher funnel, it can get conversions. We often see them more as assisted conversions, and those are maybe ones that happen after someone's seen your ad 2, 3, 4 times, and so you get a few less conversions, but those are still quite meaningful, in that customer journey. Snapchat is good for reach and frequency, especially amongst younger audiences. So there you want to look up for swipe ups, story completion rates, and then cost per swipe up. Facebook, we look at scale, retargeting, and conversion efficiency. So there you can really get a little bit more kind of high level, a little more detailed. There you can look at ROAS, return on your ad spend, cost per lead, landing page views, retargeting frequency, cost per acquisition. There you can get really nitty gritty with some of those conversion focused goals. And then finally, we're going to mention Reddit because that's sort of a new advertising platform with us the last year. But this is really good for reaching niche communities and intent rich conversations. So there you can look at cost per qualified visits, sentiment assisted conversions. So kind of like YouTube, just assisted conversions, but really, really in those niche communities might be a little bit more meaningful or have higher return on spend. And then community engagement overall.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a lot, but if you ever, want a list, feel free to reach out. We can send that over, or have more discussion on each platform goal.
And I will note too, on top of what Madison was saying about the platforms themselves, it is also important, kind of like she was saying with the previous point of business objectives. It's really important to look at the actual business objectives itself. And does that platform align with what you're trying to get? For example, if you're a B2B company and you're trying to get, let's say, lower funnel sales, something like that, you probably wouldn't want to go on TikTok because you really can't there. I mean, you can, but there's not going to be as much as something like a LinkedIn or a Meta, really depending on your product. So kind of taking that into consideration too, when you're making, figuring out what platforms to be running.
Yeah, and something we discussed too is really kind of using that as an opportunity to maybe reverse engineer towards which platform you want to run on.
Mhm.
If you want to have 200 ticket sales for this event, use that goal as somewhere, you're not going to want to end up somewhere where you can't measure ticket sales.
Mhm.
So really use that goal to drive your platform choice.
For sure. Cool. And then on top of that too is the smartest brands use measure content efficiency, not just reach. So instead of just having individual campaigns, making it more unified on what actually works. So if you have one high performing creative that has adapted well across platforms, it can do a lot better than just having 5 separate campaigns. So taking a look at what is working and then kind of using that to maximize versus like, well, we have this, we have this campaign and this campaign and this campaign, so many different campaigns. Instead, unifying them into what works and then having it kind of a more omni-channel as approach. And so kind of on top of that, with the omni-channel approach, a cross-platform dashboard is kind of changing a lot of decision making. So instead of your campaigns being siloed and individualized, they're now, or they should be now, a lot more unified. So you have a better idea of what's actually working. And kind of like I was saying before with the omni-channel approach, So you'll have multiple touch points rather than it just being a campaign on its own. Well, this is this campaign for this is for this. Instead, having different platforms, same message. That way, your brand is really in the forefront of users. And that helps with things like brand awareness, and then potentially getting people to become conversions, things like that. And we've talked about a bunch before with the omni-channel approach. I think we've had a whole bunch of other 10 at 10s about that, and kind of just the more times users see your ads in different placements, the more likely they are to convert. And I think we might have a chart somewhere about that one, but the more likely, the more they see it, the more they're likely to actually become a conversion for that.
Yeah,
And
sorry,
then
the chart's not pulling up for me, but imagine a chart that is telling you that, yes, the more time they
it,
see an ad, your revenue does increase towards more channels.
it is exponential growth. I think the maximum is like 5, or not maximum. I think towards the later half of it is like 5. So like you have more, the more times people see your ads, the more likely they are to become a conversion or your intended KPI. But yeah, what does that mean for the future of KPI attribution and sentiment? With AI-driven analytics, it kind of helps us as marketers understand what actually performed, or what, not just what performed, but why. It kind of tells more of the story on why it might have worked or where it could potentially go, and it kind of helps us. AI is helping us kind of fill in that gap, rather than it just being like, well, this worked because this and that. It helps us fill in more of that why, and also where we can potentially go increasingly on top of that. So it's becoming a lot more important than just clicks and impressions, and kind of a more story driven on here's what works and here's where we can go.
Yeah, so that's kind of a lot of information thrown at you, and I'm sure a lot of it makes maybe intuitive sense, but it is really good to just kind of understand those platforms, and so you can either inform yourself or your clients, or other decision makers in your company, of what really is the story of success, and why are you on a platform, and are you meeting those goals.
Mhm.
So feel free to add any questions in the chat. We do check them later if you're watching this after the fact. But thank you so much for joining our 10 at 10 today.
Yep. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Hannah.